difficulties. We're going to try and finish second part. The Gemara, the Talmud in Sanhedrin 72a says, someone who comes to kill you, get up and kill him first. The right of self-defense, the right of preemption. And I'm not going to dwell on that, that's for another time, but that's where we're focused on. The idea that Jewish people are targets on our back for 2,000 years, more than any other people on the planet, and therefore what may apply to them, to the rest of the world, does not apply to us, because the cops can't be everywhere to protect us, and so therefore we have to rely on ourselves, and God, of course, to protect us. And we have to take every step necessary to protect ourselves. And people at this conference were talking about, rabbis were talking about making inroads of new rapport and new alliances with other communities, Gentile communities, and we see how that works. We saw how none of them, Mayor says, stood with us in the Soviet Jewry struggle. None of this, we were all over bleeding for the causes of civil rights in the South during the 60s, but in the late 60s, 67, 73, the Yom Kippur War, the Six-Day War, nobody stood with us, nobody rallied to our defense, even spoke in defense in the American minority communities or even in the white communities. We were alone. And to think that we have some kind of a pipe dream that we're going to have unity and we're going to have people rally to us, it hasn't happened before, it's never going to happen. And I'd just like to mention that we have a perfect example of this in our community right here. We have this fellow running around calling himself whatever he calls himself, and he's harassing people on the streets. He's trying to bait people into hitting him or attacking his camera. He's just an agent provocateur. He is just inciting people to violence so he can either sue them and make money or have a cheap thrill of having them arrested. He is an anti-Semite. He is a Jew hater, and he's all over the place with his camera, looking at all the security, trying to, for whatever purpose that we can only imagine, tell people how they can get into synagogues that are locked up and how they can come to these schools that are guarded with security guards and where they should go and what they should look for, etc. If that's not illegal, I don't know what is. First Amendment right of the right to freedom of speech is one thing, but you're not allowed. That First Amendment right says you're not allowed to cry fire in a crowded theater and have everybody trample themselves to death trying to get out. You're not allowed, your freedom of speech does not go that far, does not extend to that point. And therefore, what he's doing is inciting to riot, is inciting to hatred and violence, and it's illegal. It's not free. He doesn't have the freedom to do that, the freedom to harass people on the streets, freedom to point out the weaknesses of certain security provisions that are in synagogues or in the schools. That he has no right. He should be arrested. I don't know what's wrong with the police. I don't know what's wrong with the courts. I don't know what's wrong with the political elected officials in this town. And the Jewish establishment is doing nothing to try and to alleviate the problem. They're not putting any pressure on the city hall. They're not putting any pressure on the police to get rid of this guy, to find a way to shut him down. It's absolutely against the law what he's doing. I just want to deliver a little story about Hanukah. Well, first of all, Rameir Khan was once asked, but you're a rabbi, you're a Jew, you believe in the Torah and all the prophets in the Bible and the Tanakh. It says they're going to beat their plowshares into all their swords into plowshares. What's the matter with you? Don't you believe in that vision of the future? And he goes, yes, absolutely, I believe in it, but the Jewish people are going to go last because we have a trust but verify. When we see everybody chopping down their swords into plowshares, then we'll do the same to ours. We're going to go last. We've earned the right to go last in history, and we're going to go last. And he said, don't let us not be caught with pruning hooks when everybody still has swords. Someone said at this conference, and this will segue into the Hanukah message I have that ties into all this. Someone says, well, he gave a great oration of the laws of weapons in synagogues, in the temple, when we had a Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, And he says, well, the main thing is it shouldn't distract from the davening. It's true. Those laws are true. Those authorities that spoke out these things are true. But certainly the threat to life trumps that. If somebody has a real feeling that their life is in danger, they're allowed to have weapons, concealed and even unconcealed at the proper times when there's a threat to life. Like in Israel, at any time, God forbid, we've seen there were attacks, violent attacks on Shabbos, Yontif, doesn't matter when, and you can't daven if you're dead. So we have a primary responsibility to stay alive, to chai behem, to keep the mitzvahs, and to keep the mitzvahs by staying alive so that we can do the mitzvahs. Hanukah teaches us a very specific point. Rameir asks, what is the main miracle, the big nace, the big miracle that happened in Hanukah? A lot of people say, well, obviously the oil that could have lasted for 1 day lasted for 8 days. The war was an amazing war. They were the bedraggled Kohanim, not trained in war, and didn't have any weapons per se against the mightiest empire that had ever been seen in their day, coming to go against them in a revolt and being victorious. Obviously, that's a huge, immense miracle. You can apply that to whatever country or whatever army you want to in the world today. What if a handful of people were able to stand up to them and topple them from power? Those are not the main miracles. Rabbi Kana says the nes b'toch hanes, the miracle within the miracle, is that there was anybody left in those days to stand up. For 50 years, they had trampled on Judaism. They had forbidden the laws of Torah to the point where probably a majority of the Jews had gone over to the Greeks, the Hellenist Jews, and they were helping the Greeks occupy Yerushalayim and Har HaBayis, the Temple Mount, and preventing the Jews from worshiping there, and preventing the Jews, whenever they could, from doing many of the mitzvahs in the Torah. And it was a miracle that anyone was left to stand up. It was a miracle that anyone had the courage to stand up. In the face of all of this, it all seemed lost, all seemed totally beyond the pale. We were able to find 12 people who had had enough to stand up. The question is, there were protests before that. There were people who gave their lives in order to approach the decrees that were against the Jewish Torah, against the Judaism, and defy them. Hannah and her 7 sons wouldn't bow down to the idol of Antiochus, and another Hannah did a bris milah, a circumcision on her son, and jumped off the building or the wall to her death, to their death, but to show that they were defying the orders, that they weren't allowed to learn Torah or keep the Shabbos or keep circumcision or the new month proclamations. And there was no miracle then. There were great Jews that were standing up to this. We know the story of Yehudis, who stood up to the governor of Halifaurnis and chopped off his head because he had a decree of prima noctur, that the first night of the wedding night would be spent with him for any bride in Jerusalem and in Yerushalayim, and so she went and lopped his head off. But no miracle from Hashem to depose the Greeks from authority and power and hegemony over the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael didn't happen. It only happened when Matisyahu saw the Jew about to worship the pig and slaughter it to worship Antiochus's bust, his statue that was brought into the public square. Only then, when he fell upon him and killed him, and then the rest of the Jews standing there attacked the Greek guards and killed them, the contingent of that unit, that troop, and that sparked the whole rebellion. Now, of course, you would say, on paper they had no chance, so why did they do something as futile as this? It was suicide. That's the miracle. That is the miracle, that they didn't say that they didn't didn't just accept their fate. They said Torah, Judaism is too important to keep alive. Life is not worth living unless we are going to stand up for the Torah and demand our right to keep the Torah in our own homeland, and nobody's going to tell us not to do that. And so in order to do that, and in order to defy the Jews and the Gentiles, the Greeks and the Jews who were traitors to the Torah, we are going to go to war. And we may stand no chance, but we're willing to die rather than to have this. We're ready to die rather than to have this situation continue anymore. That's when Hashem made the miracle that is the Hanukah story. When we showed that there's more than just this menorah at the end as the symbol, that it should have lasted one day. And these people took it upon themselves to light it anyway, even though they only had one day, to show their energy and their enthusiasm, their yearning to do the mitzvahs. And it lasted for 8 days as a symbol for the whole miracle in itself, that there was a few little Jews that were willing to stand up and not take it anymore. And that led to the miracle of the Great War and the victory, and that led to Hashem in turn showing this symbolic nace, this miracle, that one day's worth of oil burned for 8, to show that it doesn't matter how many numbers we have. When we are dedicated completely to Hashem, we are going to be able to overcome all of our enemies. And it's more than just oil that is on this great menorah that they lit back then. It's all the blood, all of them, Yehuda Maccabee, all the 4 out of the 5 brothers, all died fighting for this revolution to succeed and to throw off the yoke of the Greeks and to conquer Yerushalayim and Har Bayis back from the Hellenist Jews that were holding it ruthlessly and with great cruelty and avarice for power, and they just were stomping all over the Torah loyal Jews for 25, 50 years, whatever it was, till this rebellion was successful. And that's the point. The point is, it takes our willingness to bleed for our cause. And whether it's defending the lives of Jews or defending our right to keep the Torah and the mitzvahs of the Torah and learn Torah, we have to show our willingness to put our blood into that oil that's on that menorah. And that's the message of Hanukah. That's the miracle within the miracle. That shows the energy of the Jewish people being able to see the light of Torah as brighter and the only light, the true light, not the gaudiness of all the lights around, of the Greek Empire or nowadays the Western world, to not be dissuaded by it, not to be overwhelmed with it. That is that is the power, that is the influence that we have, that we think the Western culture is everything and we should bow down to it and rush into it and forget about our Judaism. And we have to take the time to consider ourselves fortunate that we have our ancestors' examples to follow. They didn't have anybody to follow. They did this on their own. They blazed the trail themselves. But we have their example. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and slaughter anybody. I'm telling you to stand up for yourself. When whatever it matters for Torah, Judaism, safety of the Jews in our community, to demand of the authorities and the police and the political leaders and of our Jewish so-called establishment leaders, whether it's rabbis or laity in the Orthodox community or in the secular community, it doesn't matter who they are. If they're not going to lead, then they have to get out of the way and let those of us who are prepared to do the things necessary to make sure Jews are protected, safe, secure, and afraid. We have to make them afraid of us now. That's the message of Hanukah. That's the message of Shimon and Levi way back in the time of the Chumash. You have to make the world fear to stand up against the people of Hashem. We are the people that had rocks come down on our enemies from Shemayim when we fought wars under Yoshua in the Eretz Yisrael. We are the people who have to learn who we are. We have historical amnesia, Rabbi M said, of what the Jewish people are supposed to be, who we are, and we have to rekindle that flame. That's the message of Hanukah. Find our dignity, find our pride, and that'll lead to our redemption. And I wish everybody a good Hanukah, happy Hanukah, and may all of our dreams come true. Binyan Beis HaMikdash soon in our days, and strength to the Jewish people. Ramera used to say we have to take a Torah in one hand and a strong Jewish army in the other hand, and for us here in the Gullus, if we're not going to go back to Eretz Yisrael, a strong Jewish hand of our own army, protecting our community and standing up for our community, not necessarily only with arms, with our attitudes, with our demanding of the civil authorities that they pay attention and not be a no-show like they were for poor Kalev when he was attacked at that shul, and nobody came to the 19 calls to the police, nobody showed up. If you're not going to show up, don't cry, don't get angry when we take matters into our own hands, because you're leaving us no choice. And Chag Sameach, Am Yisrael Chai, Od Kahana Chai.